If you ever think your job is bad, just remember mine. At 19, I was scrubbing gold-plated toilets for people who thought my name was Hey You. The Harrison family was the kind of rich you only see on TV. Private jets, champagne for breakfast, gala events every weekend. And me? I was the invisible girl in the background, making sure everything sparkled while they laughed and bragged about how self-made they were. Yeah, right. Let me back up a little. My name is Ella Marston. I grew up in a small town where opportunities dried up faster than spilled water on a Texas sidewalk. When my mom got sick and the bills piled up, I dropped out of community college and took the first job that paid, a live-in maid for the Harrisons. At first, I told myself it was temporary just until Mom got better. Just until I saved enough. Just until, but months turned into years, and every day I became a little more invisible. The mansion was a monster of white marble and glass, sitting on the edge of a cliff that overlooked the ocean. It had 12 bedrooms, 2 theaters, an indoor pool, and a closet bigger than my whole house growing up. You could get lost in that place, and believe me, I tried. Mr. Harrison, Charles, was a red-faced man with a permanent scowl and a voice that could peel paint off walls. He ran some kind of investment firm. Whatever that meant. All I knew was, he spent more time yelling into his Bluetooth earpiece than actually working. Mrs. Harrison, Vanessa, was worse. She floated through the house like a queen on a cloud of expensive perfume, leaving destruction in her wake. If a vase was out of place or a towel folded wrong, she'd snap her fingers like she was summoning a dog. And then there were their kids, Chloe and Brandon, both older than me, both fully unemployed, both somehow convinced they were better than everyone else on the planet. One morning, I was polishing the silverware when Chloe strolled into the dining room wearing designer pajamas that probably cost more than my yearly salary. "EW," she said, wrinkling her perfect nose. "Why are you breathing on the forks?" I'm not," I stammered, setting the fork down. She rolled her eyes. "Well, stop. Your poor people germs are gonna make me sick." I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. Later that afternoon, while I was scrubbing the baseboards, Brandon dumped an entire smoothie on the floor, then called me in and said, "Oops. Better get that before it stains, Cinderella." No apologies. No tip. Nothing but smirks and laughter as I scrubbed the floor at his feet. The rules were simple. Work until you drop, stay out of sight unless summoned. Never ever act like you had a life outside of serving them. And the pay? Barely enough to cover my mom's medicine, no benefits, no days off, no respect. I slept in a tiny room in the basement, next to the laundry machines, where the walls sweated in the summer and froze in the winter. My mattress was a slab of foam thinner than a pancake, and my alarm clock was the roar of Mrs. Harrison's treadmill at 5 a.m. every morning. Still, I had a secret, a tiny ember of hope buried deep inside me. Every night after a 14-hour shift, I pulled out my second-hand laptop, the one I rescued from a thrift store, and baked cupcakes, cookies, little pies with flaky crusts and gooey centers. I photographed them under the harsh yellow light of my basement bulb and posted them online. Ella's Enchanted Bakery. It was a joke at first. Nobody bought anything. But slowly, very slowly, a few people started to notice. A lady down the street ordered a dozen cupcakes for her kid's birthday. Then her friend ordered cookies. Then someone asked if I could do a wedding cake. Each little order felt like a lifeline. A way out. Of course, I couldn't let the Harrisons know that they'd already made it clear. Our employees are loyal. No side jobs. No distractions. Never mind that I was working 80 hours a week for scraps. In their eyes, I was property. Still, I dreamed of getting my mom the best doctors. Of moving into a little house with a front porch and a garden. Of never having to call anyone sir or ma'am ever again. But dreams are dangerous things in places like that. And the Harrison family. They were about to crush mine in ways I couldn't even imagine. It all started one sunny afternoon. Mrs. Harrison was hosting a charity luncheon. Save the dolphins or adopt a peacock or whatever fashionable cause was trending that week. All the ladies showed up in pastel dresses and oversized hats, sipping mimosas and pretending they cared about anything but gossip. I was in charge of the buffet. While setting up, I heard bits and pieces of their conversations. Did you hear about Charles's new investment? Doubled their money in a week. That poor girl Ella, was it? She should be grateful to even see a house like this. I mean, we are giving her a roof over her head, aren't we? That's charity enough. I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms, but I kept my head down. That was the rule. Invisible. Silent. Disposable. At one point, Mrs. Harrison pulled me aside. You, she said, wagging a manicured finger. Go clean the guest bathroom. Someone left a mess. Yes, ma'am, I said. I hurried to the second floor, scrubbing and polishing until the tiles gleamed. While wiping down the counter, I noticed something odd. A drawer slightly open. Inside, stacks of cash, jewelry, papers with strange names and offshore bank account numbers. I froze. This wasn't normal rich people behavior. This was shady. Before I could shut the drawer, I heard footsteps. Chloe's voice. What are you doing? I jumped back like I'd been caught stealing, even though I hadn't touched anything. And nothing. Just cleaning. I stammered. She narrowed her eyes, then slowly, a smirk curled on her lips. Oh, you're so busted. I didn't know what she meant then. Not yet. But I would soon. And it would be the beginning of the end. When Chloe Harrison said, "Oh, you're so busted," I didn't realize how fast my life would fall apart. At first, I thought maybe she was just being her usual cruel self. Maybe she'd tattle to her mom, and I'd get a lecture about knowing my place. But it was worse, so much worse. Within an hour, I was dragged into the Harrisons' formal sitting room. A place so sterile and white it looked like a hospital wing designed by a millionaire. Charles, Vanessa, Chloe, and Brandon were all there, lounging like judges on a throne. I stood alone on the cold marble floor, my hands wringing nervously in front of me. Mrs. Harrison fixed me with a stare so cold it could freeze fire. We know what you did, she said. My heart dropped into my stomach. I don't understand. Mr. Harrison leaned forward, resting his fat elbows on his knees. Don't play dumb, Ella. We found cash missing from the safe. Jewelry gone. And surprise, surprise, you were the only one upstairs. My mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I didn't take anything. I cried. I was just cleaning the bathroom. You told me to. Chloe snickered behind her hand. Brandon just shook his head like he was disappointed in me, like I had betrayed them. Save it, Mr. Harrison barked. We have security footage. My blood turned to ice. Footage? There were no cameras in the bathrooms. That was illegal, right? But maybe they had cameras in the hallway? Maybe they edited it. I swear I didn't. You're lucky we're not pressing charges, Mrs. Harrison interrupted, standing up and smoothing the non-existent wrinkles from her silk dress. Out of the kindness of our hearts, we'll let you go quietly. Let me go. I repeated numbly. You're fired, Mr. Harrison said simply. But what about my last paycheck? I worked 2 weeks, Mrs. Harrison laughed. Actually laughed. Consider it reimbursement for what you stole." "I didn't steal anything," I screamed, tears finally spilling over. They just stared at me with thin, satisfied smiles like they'd been waiting for this moment. They didn't even let me pack my things. Chloe and Brandon tossed a garbage bag at my feet with a few of my clothes crumpled inside. Brandon leaned down until his face was inches from mine and whispered, "Poor little thief. You're lucky Dad didn't call the cops." Chloe snapped a picture of me standing there, red-eyed and broken, and giggled. "No one will ever hire you again," she said sweetly. That I stumbled out of that mansion with nothing but a trash bag full of second-hand clothes and my crumbling dignity, no references, no paycheck, no place to live. My mom was still in the hospital, and I barely had $20 to my name. The bus ride to the city was a blur of tears and cold window glass. By the time I got to the cheap motel I could barely afford for one night, I was shaking so badly I couldn't hold my phone steady enough to look for work. I thought about giving up. I thought about how easy it would be to disappear and no one would miss me. But something deep inside me, something stubborn and angry, refused. They wanted me to disappear. They wanted me broken. That I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. The next few days were a nightmare. Every job I applied to turned me down. I didn't know it yet, but the Harrisons had poisoned the well. Word had gotten around somehow that I was a thief, a troublemaker, untrustworthy. One restaurant manager actually laughed in my face. "Yeah, I heard about you. From that charity luncheon crowd. You're famous, sweetheart. Move along." Each rejection felt like another punch to the gut. Soon, I couldn't afford the motel anymore. I was sleeping in shelters, eating food from church pantries, clutching my laptop like it was a lifeline. Because it was Ella's Enchanted Bakery was the only thing they hadn't taken from me. The website still worked. My little online shop was still live. But it wasn't enough. Not yet. That I needed something big. Something that would get people's attention fast. I spent my last few dollars on ingredients. Borrowed kitchen time from a kind woman I met at the shelter who let me bake at night when her restaurant was closed. I worked like a demon, baking through exhaustion and fear. Cupcakes, cookies, specialty cakes with edible flowers, handmade candy boxes. I posted new photos every day. I begged customers for reviews. I offered free samples at local parks and farmers markets, dragging a folding table behind me like a traveling salesman. Slowly, something started to happen. First, it was a small blog featuring my cakes. Then a local radio station mentioned me on air. Then a woman who bought a box of cupcakes for her office party posted about it online. And her post went viral. "These cupcakes saved my office from a meltdown today. Shout out to Ella's Enchanted Bakery, the real MVP." Overnight, my email exploded. Orders, interview requests, invitations to cater events. People loved my story, the girl who had nothing baking her way back to life. They didn't know the full truth. Not yet. Not about the Harrisons. But that was okay. For now. One night, as I packed another order into brown cardboard boxes, I looked out the tiny apartment window of the room I was renting and made a promise to myself. They think they destroyed me. They have no idea that I wasn't just going to survive, that I was going to thrive. And someday soon, the Harrison family would regret the day they ever messed with Ella Marston. The first real sign that my life was changing came 6 months after the day the Harrisons kicked me out like trash. It was late at night. I was still living in a shoebox apartment. One room, one creaky window, and a bathroom the size of a closet, but it was mine, paid for by my hands. My work. The kitchen counter was buried under boxes of cupcakes, cookies, and cake pops, all wrapped in pink and gold ribbon. I was prepping for my first real catering gig. A wedding. 200 guests. 3-tier cake. Plus dessert tables.it was the kind of job that could launch a real career as I piped frosting onto yet another batch of lemon cupcakes. My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Unknown. Enjoy the spotlight while you can. Thief.my heart slammed against my ribs. I swallowed hard, hands shaking. I knew exactly who it was. I deleted the message without replying, trying to shake the feeling crawling up my spine. But the seed of fear had been planted. They were watching me. The Harrisons hadn't forgotten me, and worse, they weren't done with me yet. The next morning, I shoved the fear down deep and pulled on a brave face. This wedding was too important to screw up. I loaded my battered second-hand van, another miracle paid for by cupcake money, and drove out to the venue. It was a fairy tale place. Rolling green lawns, white gazebos, soft golden light. The bride, a sweet woman named Dana, practically cried when she saw the dessert table I set up. "It's perfect," she whispered, dabbing her eyes. "It's more than I ever dreamed." Hearing those words made everything, the sleepless nights, the hunger, the humiliation, worth it. For the first time in years, I felt proud. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was building something real. Word spread fast after that. Within a month, I had a full calendar of events, baby showers, corporate parties, birthdays, weddings. People loved my designs, the edible gold leaf, the sugar flowers, the rich homemade flavors no factory bakery could touch. Social media was my best friend. I posted daily, little behind-the-scenes videos of piping roses onto cakes, assembling dessert towers, testing new flavors. Followers flooded in by the thousands. Local food blogs called me the Queen of Confections. One even nicknamed me Cinderella of Cupcakes. It was cute. It made people root for me. What they didn't know, what I never shared online, was the real Cinderella moment. The ugly, brutal truth about the Harrisons. It was almost exactly 1 year to the day after they fired me when the first serious warning came. I was catering a charity event, ironically, for a local children's hospital, when I noticed a familiar figure across the room. Vanessa Harrison. She was dressed to kill, draped in a diamond necklace that could have funded the entire event twice over. Her face was smooth and stretched tight from too many facelifts, but I recognized her immediately, and worse, she recognized me. Our eyes met across the room. She smiled. Not a kind smile. A predator's smile, like a cat watching a mouse that didn't realize it was already cornered. I busied myself refilling the dessert trays, pretending not to notice her. But the feeling of her gaze burned holes in my back. All night later, as I was packing up, a woman in a sleek navy dress approached me. "Excuse me," she said. "Are you Ella Marston?" "Yes," I said cautiously. She smiled, all white teeth and cold eyes. "My name's Vanessa Green. I'm a reporter for High Society Weekly. We'd love to feature your story." My stomach twisted. I knew High Society Weekly. It wasn't a normal magazine. It was a gossip rag, the kind that ruined lives with one juicy headline. Something about the way she smiled made me feel like a rabbit looking at a fox. "I'll think about it," I said carefully, backing away. I didn't trust it. Not one bit. That night, I barely slept. Paranoia gnawed at me. What if the Harrisons were setting me up again? What if they planted a story, twisted the narrative to make me look bad? I thought about my mom, still recovering, still needing care. I thought about the customers who believed in me. I couldn't afford another scandal. Not now. Not ever. I decided right then. I had to protect myself. No more being the helpless maid. No more easy target. If they wanted a fight, they were going to find out just how much I'd learned since they threw me out on the street. I hired a lawyer, a smart, tough woman named Anita Patel, who specialized in small business defense. I paid her with 3 months of profits, and it nearly gutted me. but it was worth every penny. Anita helped me set up contracts, trademarks, non-disclosure agreements that we secured my brand legally, airtight, and no one could touch me without a fight, even upgraded my equipment, rented a commercial kitchen space, hired 2 part-time helpers. Ella's Enchanted Bakery wasn't just a side hustle anymore. IT was a rising empire. And deep down, I knew the Harrisons were seething. Still, the attacks kept coming, subtle at first. Bad reviews started appearing online, from accounts that had never ordered anything. One claimed I used expired ingredients. Another accused me of stealing recipes. I traced some of the accounts. Guess what? They were linked to burner emails created the same day the reviews were posted, sloppy and desperate. The final straw came 2 months later. I received an email from a prestigious event planner, someone who booked celebrity weddings. She was impressed with my work. She wanted to meet in person. I was thrilled, until I arrived at the meeting location and found no event planner waiting. Instead, there was a process server handing me a lawsuit filed by Vanessa and Charles Harrison. They were accusing me of stealing confidential information, defamation, and breach of contract. All lies. All intended to crush me. I sat in my car afterward, the lawsuit papers trembling in my hands. Tears blurred my vision. For a moment I almost crumbled, almost. But then I remembered the girl who cried on a dirty motel bed, the girl who baked by flashlight in borrowed kitchens, the girl who survived, and something inside me hardened into steel. They want a war. Fine. I'll give them one. In this time, I wouldn't be the one losing everything. The lawsuit wasn't even the worst part. Anita, my lawyer, warned me the minute she saw the papers. This isn't about winning, she said, flipping through the thick stack of lies. It's about drowning you, bleeding you dry, smearing your name. And she was right. The Harrisons didn't care if their accusations were flimsy. They had money, they had influence, and worst of all, they had the media. It started with a single article. Sweetheart baker accused of betrayal. Cinderella story turned sour. Ex-maid steals from benefactors. Pictures of me, laughing, working, smiling at farmers' markets, plastered across clickbait headlines. And right next to them, pictures of Vanessa and Charles Harrison, looking solemn and devastated. Professional victims. The narrative they spun was disgusting. According to them, they had generously given me a job when no one else would, had trusted me like family, had helped me get back on my feet, and in return, poor little Ella had stolen their secret recipes, slandered their good name, and profited off their generosity. It was a fairy tale flipped upside down, and people ate it up. Within days, my bakery's online orders plummeted. Emails poured in, not from customers, but from trolls. Thief. Liar. Ungrateful snake. My social media DMs turned into a sewer. Even old friends stopped returning my calls. I could feel it. The whole world slowly pulling away, like the tide slipping back from a dying fish on the shore. And then the real hammer fell. The event planner who had wanted to work with me canceled. The bridal expos I had booked tables at refunded my money and politely declined. Even my landlord, who had always been friendly, suddenly issued a warning. Too much negative attention, he said, not meeting my eyes. Bad for business. Might have to reconsider your lease. It didn't matter that nothing was proven. It didn't matter that the lawsuit was built on lies. I in the court of public opinion. I was already guilty. I remember the night it all hit me. I sat alone on the cracked kitchen floor of my apartment, surrounded by unopened mail, bills, cancellation notices, legal documents. The little fairy lights I had strung around the room blinked overhead, mocking me. All I could hear was the Harrisons' laughter in my mind. They had done it. They had ruined me again, and This time, there might not be a way back. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to break. I cried until my throat was raw, until my body ached, until I felt like there was nothing left inside me but dust. Why fight? Why keep clawing up a hill that only led to another cliff? I was tired. So tired. Maybe this was my fate. Maybe I really was just a maid pretending to be something more. Maybe I didn't deserve any of it. But then, somewhere in the middle of the tears, I saw it.my old vision. Board.it had fallen behind the fridge months ago, and in my cleaning frenzy, I had shoved it back out without realizing. It was bent, coffee-stained, falling apart, but still visible. Pictures of bakery storefronts. Quotes about resilience. A photo of my mom, smiling weakly in her hospital bed, clutching one of my cupcakes like it was the most precious thing in the world, and in bold marker across the top, "You are stronger than they know." I stared at it for a long time, and something deep and fierce and furious woke up inside me. They might have money, they might have power, but I had something they didn't. Truth, skill, and a heart they could never buy or break. They wanted to see me crawl, fine. But when I stood back up, I was going to make sure they never forgot it. The first thing I did was call Anita. "I want to fight," I said, voice hoarse but steady. She didn't hesitate. "I'll make some calls." Next, I got to work reclaiming my own story. If the Harrisons could plant lies, I could plant the truth. I started small. A long, heartfelt post on my bakery's page. No drama. No names. Just the real story. About the maid who lost everything and built it back with nothing but flour, sugar, and grit. I didn't beg for sympathy. I didn't whine. I simply told the truth, and people listened. Not everyone, of course. Plenty of trolls still filled my inbox. But real customers, the ones who had tasted my cakes, who had seen my work, started speaking up, posting their own pictures, sharing their experiences, leaving real reviews that drowned out the fake ones. "I don't care what the media says," one woman wrote. "Ella's cakes made my wedding magical. She's the real deal." Slowly, the tide began to turn, but I knew it wouldn't be enough, not yet. The Harrisons weren't just trying to destroy my business. They wanted to destroy me. Anita came back a few days later with more news, good and bad. "The good news," she said, tapping her tablet, "is that we can countersue defamation, business interference, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We've got a case." "And the bad news," her mouth twisted, "they're about to go nuclear." I frowned. "What do you mean?" She flipped the tablet around. A news article, not yet published but leaked to us through one of her contacts. "Humble baker's dark secret. Criminal past exposed." My blood ran cold. "They're lying," I said automatically. "I know," Anita said. "But it doesn't matter. They're feeding the media story that you were arrested years ago for theft. I've never even been in a police station." I protested. "They're forging it," she said grimly. "Fake documents. Fake witnesses. If it sticks, your reputation could be permanently destroyed." It was worse than I thought. The Harrisons weren't just rich and petty. They were ruthless. They would rather fabricate crimes than admit they had wronged me. And if I didn't act fast, everything I loved, everything I fought for would be gone. For good, that night. I made a decision. No more playing defense. It was time to fight fire with fire. Time to go after the truth, expose them, burn their lies to the ground. Because if I went down, I was dragging them with me. I wasn't naive. I knew if I wanted to beat the Harrisons, it wasn't enough to tell the truth. Truth alone doesn't win wars. Proof does, and I was going to get it. First, I made a list. Everything I knew about the Harrisons. Every shady thing I had witnessed while working for them. Every whispered conversation. Every offhand comment that made my skin crawl. I spent hours hunched over my tiny kitchen table, scribbling notes. Money laundering, tax fraud, illegal hires, fake charities. They weren't just entitled snobs. They were criminals hiding behind charity balls and designer suits. I just needed evidence, and lucky for me, I still had friends in low places. One of the first people I called was Rosa. She had been the other maid, older, quieter, working for the Harrisons for nearly 20 years before they fired her without severance. She answered on the first ring. "Mihija," she said warmly. "I was waiting for your call." I blinked. "You were?" "Of course," she said. "I saw what they did to you. I knew you would fight back." Her voice hardened. "And I want to help." We met the next day at a little diner outside the city. Over greasy eggs and burnt coffee, Rosa slid a manila envelope across the table. Inside, copies of pay stubs, all showing wages way below legal minimums. Photos of undocumented workers cleaning the mansion, teenagers, some barely old enough to drive. Recordings, crackly but clear, of Vanessa bragging about skimming donation money from her so-called orphans fund. It was a gold mine. "Why did you keep all this?" I whispered. Rosa shrugged, eyes sharp. "I learned a long time ago, when you work for vipers, you carry your own anti-venom." Next, I reached out to Marco. He used to be the Harrison family's private chef, until Charles accused him of stealing wine and fired him without notice. Marco was still bitter and still had access to old emails and texts. Emails where Charles joked about insider trading. Texts where Vanessa ordered him to throw away certain food before the health inspector arrived. I gathered it all, piece by piece, stone by stone. I built my arsenal. Meanwhile, Anita got busy too. She filed a countersuit, hitting the Harrisons with defamation, business sabotage, and harassment charges. The media barely noticed at first, too busy salivating over the fake, criminal past story they were about to release about me. But we were patient. We had a bigger plan. I also made a very risky move. I hired a private investigator. His name was Dean Carter, ex-cop, expensive as hell, but worth every penny. I met him in a dingy office downtown. He sat behind a scarred wooden desk, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened. "You want to bring down the Harrisons," he said after I laid it out. "Good. Someone should." He leaned back, cracking his knuckles. "But be ready. When people like them fall, they don't fall quiet." I nodded. "I'm not afraid anymore." He grinned. "Good. Let's get dirty then." Over the next few weeks, Dean worked fast. He dug into the Harrisons' finances, their fake charities, their hidden offshore accounts. He even found a whistleblower, a former accountant who had been paid off to fudge numbers on their taxes. The deeper we dug, the filthier it got. Fraud, embezzlement, even potential bribery of public officials. The Harrisons weren't just unethical. They were criminals hiding in plain sight. And once the world saw it, they would never be able to silence me again. But there was one more piece I needed. Something personal. Something that showed who they really were, not just legally, but morally. Dean found it in an unexpected place. Vanessa's personal social media account. It was private, of course, hidden behind layers of fake names and security. But Dean was good. Really good. He hacked in legally with the help of a warrant based on Rose's evidence. And what he found made my blood boil. Photos, dozens of them. Of Vanessa at charity events, smiling sweetly for the cameras, while backstage she mocked the very people she was supposedly helping. Screenshots of texts. God, the smell at that homeless shelter. Had to hold my breath the whole time. If I have to touch one more dirty orphan, I'm going to vomit. Just smile for the cameras, darling. Then we can write it off on taxes. The public loved her, But behind closed doors, she was vile, and soon, they would see it. The final step was timing. Anita, Dean, Rosa, Marco, and I sat around my tiny kitchen table. Plotting it out. We would drop the evidence all at once. No trickle. No slow burn. A full-scale explosion. Expose their crimes, their lies, their cruelty. Publicly. On every platform we could reach, news, blogs, social media. A press conference. A document leak. Witness testimonies. All synchronized. All undeniable. They wouldn't have time to spin a news story. By the time they opened their mouths to deny it, the world would already know who they really were. I stared at the final timeline we had laid out. It was terrifying. It was risky. If we failed, I could lose everything again. But deep down, I knew this was the only way, not just for me, for every maid they underpaid, every worker they humiliated, every person they crushed under their fake smiles. It was time. The night before the launch, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, heart pounding. I thought about everything I had lost, everything I had rebuilt. I thought about my mom, still fragile, still fighting, who had once told me, through tears, "You are not what they say you are, Ella. You are so much more." And I thought about the little girl I used to be, the one who believed kindness would always win. Maybe it didn't, but justice could, and tomorrow, justice was coming. The day of the press conference dawned cold and gray, fitting, I thought grimly, like the beginning of a funeral. Not mine, though. We set it up at a small hotel ballroom downtown. Nothing fancy, just clean, neutral, serious. Anita stood beside me, calm and polished in a navy suit. Dean Carter, the private investigator, hovered near the back, arms crossed, watching everything. Rosa and Marco were there too, standing quietly off to the side, ready to step forward when needed. The reporters trickled in slowly at first, mostly small outlets, bloggers, curious nobodies. But then bigger names started showing up. Once the rumors hit social media that Ella Price, the so-called thief baker, was about to make a public statement, people smelled blood, and nothing draws a crowd faster than the promise of a scandal. I stepped up to the podium, heart hammering so loud I could barely hear. The cameras flashed. The microphones hissed. I cleared my throat, leaned in, and spoke. "Good morning. My name is Ella Price, and today I'm here to tell the truth. No drama. No rage. Just cold, undeniable facts. I laid it all out. How the Harrisons had fired me unfairly. How they had fabricated a lawsuit to destroy my bakery. How they planted fake stories about my criminal past. I presented financial records showing tax fraud, screenshots of texts revealing their disgusting comments about charity work, signed affidavits from Rosa, Marco, and the former accountant. The reporters were eating it up, scribbling notes, snapping photos, recording every word. Anita stepped forward next, sharp and confident. She explained the countersuit we had filed, detailed the crimes we were reporting to authorities, made it clear this wasn't just a petty grudge. It was a full-blown criminal case. Dean took the floor after her. He showed video evidence, grainy footage of Charles Harrison slipping a wad of cash to a building inspector, audio recordings of Vanessa bragging about skimming from charity donations. Every piece tighter than the last. No way to explain it away. No way to spin it. They were caught, dead to rights. The final blow? A leaked montage, anonymous source, aka Dean, of Vanessa's private social media posts. The worst quotes, the cruelest jokes, the ugliest snapshots of the woman behind the pearls and designer dresses. The room went dead silent as the video played. No one moved. No one breathed. When it ended, I looked out at the sea of faces, stunned, horrified, furious. And I said the last words I had written down carefully, practicing over and over. I believed once that kindness could change people, but some people don't change. They just hide better until you drag them into the light. And then I stepped back from the microphone. The explosion was immediate, reporters shouting questions, cameras flashing like lightning, phones buzzing nonstop. By the time I reached the back exit with Anita and Dean hustling me along, Twitter was already trending. Hashtag Harrison scandal, hashtag justice for Ella, hashtag fake philanthropist. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I knew we had lit the match, and the fire was spreading fast. The news cycle erupted within hours. Morning shows debated it breathlessly, blogs published minute-by-minute updates. People dug into every old photo, every event the Harrisons had ever attended, every financial record they could find. It was an avalanche, and for once I wasn't the one buried underneath. The Harrisons tried to fight back. Of course, they hired crisis PR teams, released carefully worded apology statements, even filmed a pathetic video in their mansion, Vanessa crying fake tears, Charles looking grim and misunderstood. It backfired spectacularly. People weren't buying it. Not after the screenshots. Not after the documents. Not after the smug tone leaked in Vanessa's private posts. Their tears looked like crocodile tears. Their words sounded hollow. The public smelled blood. And they weren't letting go. Within a week, major charity organizations cut ties with them. Their names were pulled off fundraiser rosters. Their photos erased from glossy brochures. Donors fled in droves. Then came the bigger blows. Investigations launched. Bank accounts frozen. Sponsors pulled contracts. And the real killer, Charles's company, his golden goose, saw its stock price plummet after whispers of insider trading hit the news. Shareholders demanded answers. Lawsuits stacked up. Their perfect life crumbled faster than I could have ever dreamed. I watched it all from my tiny apartment, laptop balanced on my knees, the same way they once watched me fall. Except now, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel weak. I felt powerful, for once. The world wasn't laughing at me. It was laughing at them, but even with all the satisfaction burning in my veins, I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. The Harrisons were wounded, bleeding, but rich people don't give up easily. They still had resources, still had connections. If I wanted to finish this, I would have to go even further, not just destroy their reputation, destroy their empire, brick by brick, until there was nothing left but dust. And I had the perfect plan. The Harrisons could survive a scandal, maybe, even a lawsuit. But there was one thing they couldn't survive: bankruptcy. Because without money, they had nothing. No friends. No protection. No second chances. They were parasites. And parasites die when they lose their host. I didn't just want them exposed. I wanted them broken. The first step: target the cracks already forming. Dean and Anita helped me draw up a list. Charles's investment firm, already under SEC investigation. Vanessa's charities, hemorrhaging donors by the minute. Real estate holdings, over-leveraged, mortgaged to the hilt. Secret offshore accounts, now being watched by international financial authorities. All we had to do was apply pressure and watch them snap. First, Anita filed a petition to free certain Harrison assets, arguing that they were part of the defamation damage calculation. It was a long shot, legally speaking, but it sent a message. The vultures were circling. Next, Dean orchestrated a subtle leak. A carefully timed, anonymous tip to a major financial news outlet. The tip exposed questionable loans tied to Charles's company, suggesting a bigger fraud scheme than anyone realized. The article went viral. Investors panicked. Shares plummeted even harder. Regulators pounced. The company board, terrified for their own skins, called an emergency meeting and voted to remove Charles Harrison as CEO. Just like that, he was out. Publicly disgraced. Financially crippled. Powerless. But that was only half the battle. Vanessa was still clutching onto her fake charity empire. Like a rat clinging to a sinking ship. Time to sink it faster. I reached out to every journalist, every activist group, every watchdog organization I could find. Rosa and Marco gave interviews. Other former employees came forward too. Housekeepers, drivers, assistants, people who had been fired, bullied, underpaid. Their stories painted a damning picture, not just of fraud. Of abuse, verbal attacks, unsafe working conditions, racist, classist comments made behind closed doors. The public outrage reignited, hotter than before. No one wanted to donate to a charity queen who treated the poor like trash. Sponsors pulled out. Major donors demanded audits. Government agencies opened formal investigations. Within 2 months, Vanessa's prized Harrison Hope Foundation was under criminal review for embezzlement and fraud. Its assets were frozen. Its board of directors resigned en masse, and Vanessa, she became a walking pariah. No gala invitations. No charity balls. No magazine covers. Just tabloid headlines screaming, from high society to high crimes. Vanessa Harrison, America's fake sweetheart. But even with their companies collapsing, their reputations trashed, the Harrisons still had one last weapon. Their house. The Harrison estate wasn't just a mansion. It was a symbol. 30,000 square feet of marble chandeliers and gold-plated luxury. If they could cling to that house, paraded around as proof that they were still elite, maybe, just maybe, they could salvage some of their shattered image. I couldn't let that happen, and I knew exactly where to strike. Remember that fake charity money Vanessa funneled into their home renovations? Yeah, turns out, using tax-exempt donations to pay for personal property improvements is highly illegal. And when Anita's team forwarded evidence of that to the IRS, well, let's just say government agents move very quickly when rich people cheat them out of money. One crisp morning, 3 black SUVs rolled up to the Harrison estate. Agents poured out, suits grim and professional. They served papers, locked the gates, seized the property, pending full investigation. Neighbors filmed it gleefully from their porches. By afternoon, the footage was everywhere. The Harrisons evicted in broad daylight. Charles shouting at officers. Vanessa screaming, clutching designer handbags like they were life rafts. I watched it all unfold. I didn't cheer. I didn't laugh. I just sat there, silent, soaking it in. Justice. Cold and final. By evening, they were holed up in a shabby rental across town, a cramped place they had paid cash for under a cousin's name. No drivers. No maids. No bodyguards. Just the two of them. Bitter, broken, alone. Exactly how they had left me, but I wasn't done. Not yet, because the Harrisons had one last lifeline they were desperate to cling to. Their public sympathy. The whole time their empire collapsed, Charles and Vanessa tried to spin a new narrative. We made mistakes, but we're still good people. We're victims of a witch hunt. This is just cancel culture run amok. Some gullible fools were starting to bite. Forgiveness pieces were being drafted. Second chance interviews were being pitched. If I wanted to bury them for good, I had to cut off even the smallest path to redemption. Permanently. And I knew exactly how to do it. I wasn't going to fight them in court anymore. I wasn't going to fight them in the media. I was going to fight them in the place they never expected. Their own rotten past. I called Dean. I need you to find something, I said. His voice was eager. What? Something I said slowly, coldly, that not even their money can erase. He chuckled. I love when you get scary. Dig deep, I said. Find everything they ever buried. He paused. Are you sure? Some rocks you can't unturn once you start. I smiled grimly. I'm counting on it. Because it wasn't enough to beat the Harrisons. I wanted to erase them. From society, from memory, from everything. I wanted the name Harrison to become a curse whispered only in warning. And by the time I was done, it would be. Dean didn't waste any time. Within 48 hours, he was back in my apartment. A battered leather folder clutched in his hand, face grim. You sure you're ready for this? He asked. I didn't hesitate. Show me. He laid the folder down carefully, almost like it was dangerous to touch, and in a way it was, because inside those pages was the bullet that would kill the Harrisons for good. It turned out, the Harrisons' success story. The origin they loved to brag about in every interview wasn't just exaggerated. It was a complete lie. The truth, back when Charles was still a nobody, just a junior partner at a small investment firm, he got involved in a massive insider trading scheme, tipped off rich friends about mergers, moved dirty money through shell companies, illegal, dangerous, but profitable, very profitable. Enough to buy that first mansion, enough to launch Vanessa's charity foundation as a PR front, enough to start building the golden empire they sat atop, all built on crime, all covered up by one very important thing, bribery. Dean had tracked down the old emails, the wire transfers, the fake LLC paperwork. Some of it was shredded, corrupted, half missing, but enough remained. Enough to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt the Harrisons' fortune was stolen from the very beginning, and it wasn't just financial crimes. There was worse. Personal testimonies. A former housekeeper from their early days. A nanny who worked for Vanessa's sister before she vanished from the public eye. Old friends who had been paid off or threatened into silence. Stories of abuse. Coercion. Cover-ups. Whispers of an incident involving Charles and a young intern back in the late 90s brushed under the rug. With a six-figure settlement and a lifetime NDA, and maybe worst of all, hints that the charitable foundations had been laundering money for organized crime families overseas. Not just charity fraud, organized crime connections. It was all there. Messy, chaotic, horrifying, and if it ever saw the light of day, the Harrisons wouldn't just be broke and humiliated. They would be imprisoned. Maybe even for decades. Dean sat back in his chair, watching me carefully. So he said, what do you want to do? For a long time, I didn't answer. I stared at the evidence. The ugly, raw truth, and I thought about everything they had done to me. The lies, the betrayal, the way they had tossed me away like garbage, all while smiling for the cameras, preaching about hope and community and giving back. Monsters wearing crowns, and for years no one had dared to challenge them, until me. I looked up at Dean, my voice steady. Burn them. He grinned. Thought you'd say that. The plan was simple. We weren't going to go to the authorities, not directly. No, too slow. Too easy to sweep under the rug. We were going to leak it all. Everything. Emails. Bank records. Witness statements. Dump it into the public domain. Let it spread like wildfire, uncontrollable, irreversible. Dean had contacts. Anonymous journalism sites. Whistleblower protection networks. Social media accounts with millions of followers. Ready to blow the story wide open. He packaged the files carefully, masking every trace back to US.by the end of the week. Everything was ready. All I had to do was give the final word. The night before we pulled the trigger, I stood alone on the rooftop of my apartment building. The city stretched out before me, endless. Glittering. I thought about the girl I used to be. The scared maid, the obedient employee, the girl who just wanted approval, love, a place to belong. And I thought about the woman I had become, the one who had survived, fought back, built an empire of her own. Without selling her soul. I smiled faintly into the wind. Goodbye, I whispered, not to the city, not to the Harrisons. That broken girl I used to be. The next morning, Dean hit send. And the world caught fire. It started small. A single tweet from a burner account. Major tip about the Harrisons incoming. Stay tuned. It blew up in minutes. Then the first file drop hit on a decentralized platform impossible to take down. Screenshots, documents, audio clips. Proof upon proof upon proof. By noon. Every major news outlet was scrambling to cover the story. By dinner time, the FBI had officially opened a criminal investigation. By midnight, search warrants were being served. Charles and Vanessa tried to deny everything at first, called it deep fakes, claimed it was political persecution. But the evidence was overwhelming, too detailed, too widespread. Even their own lawyers started backing away. Public defenders, the kind of lawyers they once sneered at, became their only option, and their so-called friends. They scattered like cockroaches when the lights come on. The final nail came a week later. An indictment. Not a civil suit. A criminal indictment. Multiple charges: fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, racketeering. If convicted on all counts, 50 years. Each. No parole. No deals. Just cold, hard prison bars. I watched their arrest live on TV. Charles, handcuffed, head down. Vanessa, crying hysterically. Makeup streaked down her face. It should have felt triumphant. It should have felt victorious. But all I felt was peace, not happiness, not gloating. Just a deep, quiet stillness inside me, the kind you only feel when a long nightmare finally ends. And as I sat there, the final headline flashing across the screen, the fall of the Harrisons, I whispered one last thing to myself, not out of hate, not out of vengeance, but out of simple, perfect truth. I win. The world didn't move on quietly. When the Harrisons fell, it was like watching an ancient dam burst. The media couldn't get enough. Morning shows, podcasts, documentaries, tabloid exposés. Everyone wanted a piece of the story, and somehow, without even trying, I became part of it. It started with a leaked photo. Me, sitting quietly at a cafe the morning after their arrest, sipping coffee. Someone snapped it and posted it online. The woman who outlasted the Harrisons. The image went viral. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know my story, not just the scandal. Me. I got interview requests from everywhere. 60 Minutes, the New York Times, Rolling Stone. People were fascinated. How had a humble maid taken down one of the most powerful families in the country? What secret strength had I hidden? What lessons could I teach? At first, I refused them all. I didn't want the spotlight. I wasn't looking to become some celebrity or inspiration porn story. I just wanted peace. A normal life. Maybe open that little bakery I used to dream about. Quiet mornings. Flower-dusted afternoons. Customers who smiled and said thank you. Simple, honest, real, but life, it seemed, had other plans. One afternoon, Dean showed up at my door again, waving a thick envelope. You might want to sit down, he said, grinning. I raised an eyebrow. I'm fine. Just tell me. He dropped the envelope on the table with a satisfying thud. Inside was an offer. A huge one. A major publishing house wanted me to write a memoir. A 7-figure deal. More money than I'd ever seen in my life, even after my lawsuit winnings. They wanted the full story, the betrayal, the revenge, The rise from nothing. They weren't asking me to sensationalize it. They wanted it raw.honest.human.at. First, I hesitated. Was I really ready to open up like that? To relive the worst moments of my life publicly? Permanently? Dean saw the doubt in my eyes. He leaned in, voice low. Listen, he said. You didn't just survive. You won. You earned the right to tell your story however you damn well please. He paused. And maybe there's another Ella out there right now, another maid, another girl stuck under someone's boot. He smiled. Maybe she needs to know she can win too. That thought hit harder than I expected, because I remember being that girl, alone, terrified, convinced that no one cared. Convinced that fighting back would just get me crushed harder. If telling my story gave even one person the courage to fight for themselves, maybe it was worth it. I signed the contract. Writing the book was brutal. I cried. I raged. I laughed at memories I thought I'd buried forever. Dean helped me, of course. So did Anita, still my fiercest ally, still my friend. Even Marco and Rosa pitched in, sharing little stories from the mansion days, filling in gaps. It wasn't just my story. It was our story. When the book was finished, it was raw, unpolished, painful, exactly the way it needed to be. Meanwhile, life moved forward. The Harrisons' trial date was set. 6 months from now. They were being held without bail. Their frozen assets were auctioned off piece by piece. Their old friends now toasted their downfall in private cocktail parties, pretending they had always known. Something was wrong. Cowards. But I didn't waste time hating them. I had better things to build now. One afternoon, while touring possible locations for the bakery, Dreamweavers, I was thinking of calling it, I bumped into someone I hadn't seen in years. Mrs. Calloway, one of the old neighbors from the Harrison estate days. We locked eyes awkwardly at the coffee shop. She hesitated, then approached me slowly. I'm so sorry, she said in a rush. I should have spoken up. Back then. When she trailed off, ashamed. I sipped my tea. I know, I said simply. She swallowed. Tears glittered at the corners of her eyes. I was scared. They had so much power, and you were just a maid. I thought. I thought it didn't matter. Her voice cracked. I'm so sorry. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I set my cup down and looked her straight in the eye. It mattered, I said. I mattered. She nodded, tears falling freely now. I know, she whispered. I stood, and after a beat, I hugged her, not for her. For me, forgiveness wasn't about excusing what happened. It was about refusing to let it chain me anymore. I was free. Truly free. Weeks passed. The bakery lease was signed. Renovations began. I visited every day, painting walls, testing recipes, designing menus. It wasn't glamorous. It was sweaty, exhausting, backbreaking work, and I loved every second of it. Because it was mine, every brick, every nail, every smell of fresh bread in the air, built by my hands. My dreams. My fight. One evening, as I stood in the half-finished kitchen, covered in flour and paint, I got a call. Dean's number flashed across the screen. Turn on the news, he said, excitement crackling in his voice. I grabbed the remote with messy hands, smearing white streaks across the buttons. The screen flickered, and there it was. Breaking news. Harrison plea deal rejected. Trial to proceed. Potential life sentences. I stared. A slow, stunned smile spread across my face. It was almost over. Truly over. No more second chances. No more slick PR campaigns. No more dodging consequences. The Harrisons were finally, permanently ruined. I leaned back against the counter, the scent of rising dough in the air, and for the first time in a long, long time, I allowed myself to dream about the future. A real future. No fear. No chains. No apologies. Just life. The day the bakery opened. The sun rose clear and golden over the city. It felt like a sign. I stood outside under the hand-painted sign Dreamweavers, wearing a simple white dress, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, from something bigger. Joy, real joy. The kind I used to think only existed in fairy tales. Friends gathered around me, Anita, fussing with the flower arrangements, Dean, pretending not to tear up, Marco and Rosa, carrying boxes of pastries and laughing loudly, even Mrs. Calloway, now a regular supporter, bringing a huge bouquet of daisies. I looked at them all. My real family, not bound by blood or money, bound by choice, bound by love. As I unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open, a crowd outside cheered. The first customer, a shy little girl clinging to her mother's hand, stepped inside, eyes wide at the trays of golden croissants and colorful cakes. I knelt down and handed her a cookie shaped like a butterfly. She beamed, and right there in that simple, perfect moment, I knew I had won. The bakery buzzed with life all morning. Old friends, curious strangers, reporters snapping pictures. I didn't mind. This attention wasn't toxic, like the Harrisons' fake glitter. It was real. Earned. Honest. By noon, we had sold out of half the stock. By 2 o'clock, Anita was frantically baking in the back, cursing under her breath in Spanish. I just laughed and rolled up my sleeves to help. Between batches, Dean pulled me aside. You might want to sit for this, he said, a mischievous glint in his eyes. I narrowed mine suspiciously. He handed me his phone. A news alert blinked on the screen. Breaking. Charles and Vanessa Harrison convicted on all counts. Sentenced to 68 years combined. I stared, reread it, then read it again. It was real. It was done. No appeals. No loopholes. No way out. The Harrisons, once untouchable, once worshipped, were now inmates in orange jumpsuits, facing decades behind cold concrete walls. The mighty had fallen, and they had fallen hard. I didn't cry. I didn't gloat. I just smiled quietly, tucking the phone into my apron pocket. And then I went back to kneading dough, the sun streaming warm across the counters, because this was what mattered, not there. Ruin. My rise. That evening, after we closed shop, my friends threw a small celebration right there in the bakery. Homemade decorations. Off-key karaoke. Cheap wine and better laughter. At some point, Anita dragged me up onto a chair and insisted on making a toast. To Ella, she shouted, raising her glass. The girl who baked her revenge, and her dreams. Everyone cheered. I laughed, cheeks burning. And when it was my turn to speak, I paused for a long time, looking around at all the faces that had carried me here. Finally, I said, I thought losing everything would break me. I thought being betrayed meant I wasn't worth anything. I swallowed. But the truth is, it just cleared the way for this. For us, for me. I lifted my glass high. To second chances. To real family. To dreaming louder than they can tear you down. Later, when the bakery was quiet again and the stars blinked overhead, I sat outside alone, just breathing it all in. The smell of fresh bread lingering in the air. The buzz of laughter echoing down the street. The warm ache of tired muscles that came from building something true. I thought about the past. The hurt. The betrayal. The long, hard road that led me here. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel pain. I just felt grateful. Because without all of it, without the lies, the cruelty, the injustice, I never would have found out what I was made of. I never would have learned that the brightest fires are born in the darkest nights. As I leaned back, smiling up at the stars, a single thought crossed my mind. I wasn't the maid anymore. I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the orphan girl begging for scraps of love. I was Ella Weaver, dreamer, fighter, creator, and the life I had now, I had woven it with my own hands. Fresh, golden, and finally, beautifully mine.